Well, this is either going to put you to sleep or really get your blood going. Fasten your seatbelt. Couple of prayers, the Troparion of Gregory Palamas. Light of Orthodoxy, teacher of the Church its confirmation, ideal of monks and invincible champion of theologians. Wonder-working Gregory, glory of Thessaloniki and teacher of grace, pray always to the Lord that our souls may be saved. And then, I really love this little book, man. Christ is in our midst, letters from a Russian monk, Father John, that Metropolitan Anthony designated as a starets. I'm on my 5th reading of this, and I really, really love it. Advice from the fathers in letter form to correspondents who have very, very real life difficulties, and it's very interesting to see how he handles those from advice from the fathers. Of course, Father John's not a psychotherapist, and at times I would certainly disagree with some of his advice, but I really just can't get enough of this book. From letter 28, the wise spiritual life was explained with precision by the Holy Fathers in their writings, but what they wrote can best be understood by being lived. If you yourself work to free your heart of passions, then everything will be clearer and more understandable. Holy Fathers, pray to God for us sinners and open our small minds to comprehend your writings. That's letter 28. I really appreciate the kind of the background we've had already today. It's very, very helpful, and I think I'm going to try to go quickly through the authority part. I've really appreciated what was said already with regard to authority and our ability to be able to look at sources outside of Orthodoxy as psychotherapists. We have the ability to look at truths that are out there, to use them for the betterment of our clients, our patients. But it's going to be very, very challenging today because in a lot of ways the Enneagram is a little bit overlapping with Orthodoxy, and I do want to make it clear. I kind of grew up formally with Orthodoxy and the Enneagram together, and I have a tremendous amount of appreciation for being able to have Orthodoxy as a framework by which to use the Enneagram. I was telling another person earlier that the Enneagram is out there, and it's a little bit like the Protestant church. Everybody has their own view of the Enneagram, and there's just many, many, many different applications of the Enneagram. And as a result of that, kind of like Protestantism, there are many good things that come out of it, and I think there are good applications to it. But I like to use the Enneagram specifically through the lens of Orthodoxy when it comes to ascetical practice, spiritual growth, and then I use it as a diagnostic and assessment tool, a tool only in my psychotherapeutic practice. It's important to understand the Enneagram is not a theory of counseling. All right, you can be a psychotherapist and not have the Enneagram change at all exactly how you practice. It's how I see it. It's like any other tool that you might use as a way of facilitating your psychotherapeutic practice for the benefit of your patient client. But the difficulty is a similar difficulty, I think, if you were called upon as an individual, a speaker, to stand before a room full of psychotherapists, and you were supposed to explain what Orthodoxy is or what Orthodox psychotherapy is. That's the challenge. I think my father in the Orthodox faith, Father Bill Olnhausen, the priest at my parish, if he were in such a position, I know exactly what he would say. He would quote the Apostle Philip when Philip said to Nathanael, "Come and see." Orthodoxy needs to be experienced. So we've talked about this a number of times already today. We are not a faith that lists certain things, dogmas that we have to believe in. It is experiential. The Enneagram is the same way, although to some degree that's a little bit of a misstatement. We don't really experience the Enneagram. We experience ourselves in a deeper way with the help, the map of the Enneagram. The Enneagram is a map to help the individual look at specific parts of who we are on the inside. One of the more well-known and modern teachers of the Enneagram, Helen Palmer, I'll be referring to her on several occasions, calls her approach the oral tradition. I think to some degree we can relate to that as Orthodox, although again, there's going to be these similarities between Orthodoxy and the Enneagram, but they're not quite exactly the same. There's interesting little differences there. The oral tradition for Helen Palmer would be to have individuals who identify with certain character structures very, very well, and they would stand in front like a group here before an audience and talk about themselves so that the audience would have an experiential sort of understanding of exactly what is going on with a particular character structure in the Enneagram. We might relate more to the oral tradition as things that, of course, that are passed on, or a master-disciple relationship in which the master conveys to the disciple the experiential aspects of the spiritual life in an orthodoxy. If I completely lose you within the next hour, it's not your fault. It's not because you're not intelligent. It's going to be my inability to be able to convey this adequately. But I do like, again, from Father John, from letter 4, if there's the overlap that I would like to convey between the Enneagram, the use of the Enneagram as an ascetical tool, and orthodoxy, is from letter 4, where he says, the Patericon tells how a disciple said to Asteritz that such and such a man sees angels. The Asteritz answered, this is not surprising that he sees angels, but I would marvel at a person who saw his own sins. And that really is what the Enneagram is about. I think this is a fairly old story passed down in Orthodoxy. I've seen it in several different places. Because Father John, of course, is Russian, he uses the Asteritz, but in other places it's the Abba. This is the best overlap that I see between Orthodoxy, Orthodox spirituality, Orthodox psychotherapy, and the Enneagram. The issue of authority. When we examine the nature and relationship of Orthodox psychotherapy with the Enneagram, and I'm trying to go through this really quickly because I think I'm preaching to the choir here. An issue of authority arises that is not dissimilar to other comparisons in the contemporary field of psychology and psychotherapy. The therapist working in the modern world who also happens to be Orthodox is faced with determining what among the vast array of contemporary theories and practices in our field aligns with authority as we understand it. And again, when I use Orthodox psychotherapy, I agree with the other presenters here. This is a little bit of a difficult word. This is a relatively new term, and of course refers to the title of the book by the Metropolitan. I think he's Metropolitan now, is that right? Yeah. Metropolitan Hierotheos, that describes the ancient teachings of the so-called neptic fathers. Not that we have several different categories of fathers, but the idea is that the stress was on observing the self. This is a theme that is talked about by the fathers over and over again. It's very, very clear, very unambiguous. The need to observe the self, the inner life. And that's exactly what the Enneagram attempts to do. At the end of the Sermon on the Mount, as recorded by the Apostle Matthew, we read this stunning report by the eyewitness himself. In chapter 7, 28, 29. And so it was when Jesus had ended these sayings that the people were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. I think there's several interesting things about that, I think, is because there certainly was an authoritarian body at the time. But yet the individuals that heard Jesus heard something that was substantially different. And then I think the other thing what about it is that there was something inside these individuals that rang true, that struck them at a certain part of the interior life, that they recognized the truth of what was being said by Christ at that time. To illustrate this, I'd like to quote from another author that I really like, a defender of what we do, Archbishop Chrysostomos, from his book Orthodoxy and Psychology. This is a wonderful little book. In chapter 2, the Archbishop writes, with regard to Freud, some of his, that is Freud's observations in this respect, that is regarding the fallen nature, not only parallel those of the fathers, but provide us with clinical evidence of the very psychological devices and deficits that we find described in abundance in patristic discourses on human behavior. To expose and condemn Freud for his anthropological, soteriological, and cosmological errors is one thing, a valid and necessary pursuit. To dismiss outright many of his accurate and trenchant observations about human behavior is, however, to fail at seeing the points of juncture between the perfect psychology of the fathers and the misdirected psychological data that Freud has left us. This failure quite inappropriately places Orthodox thinkers in the same class as religious fundamentalists, and this should not be. We've had this alluded to already earlier today, and I don't need to belabor that, certainly. Who these Orthodox thinkers are, the Archbishop does not mention. Specifically regarding our look at the Enneagram, the Archbishop goes on. Freud looked at the psychic world as one made of complex interactions between various instincts, all of these interactions mediated by the human need for a homeostatic balance between physical needs, the various forces of the personality, that's my emphasis, and the external stimuli that impinge on an individual from the environment. Freud also put forth his theory of personality as a working model within which to understand various aspects of one's individual makeup, and this crosses over with our concern regarding the Enneagram. And then I come then to personal authority, as I alluded to, the individual's hearing and being struck by truth. Here's a psychotherapist that I quote, and back on the table I've got lots of stuff, and included back there is the full sheet. A psychotherapist, Carol Ruth Summers. I really don't know her background. I certainly don't believe that she's Orthodox, and I really don't know exactly what religious background, if any, that she has. But here's what she said. At an Enneagram seminar, as we covered point 2, I began to feel as if my skin from head to toe was peeling away, and I was turning inside out. I learned more about my needs and how I behaved to get those needs met than I had learned in all of my years of therapy. 3 years of psychoanalysis 5 times a week, 6 years of Gestalt therapy, and 5 or 6 years of other assorted therapeutic work. That's quite a statement. That's a lot of therapy. I don't have nearly that much. The Enneagram remains the most valuable personal and therapeutic tool I have for insight and growth. One more. Kleinian psychoanalyst Louisa Powell writes concerning her personal, quote-unquote, shocking discovery of the Enneagram in her own personal and professional life. Thanks to the teaching of the personality structures and their strategies and defenses, I acquired a new coherence and clarity that previously had been lacking. Until I came across the Enneatype structures of the personality and their mechanisms of defense, strategies, and virtues, my knowledge about myself was much more limited. This increased knowledge has brought about an expansion of consciousness. I can say now that I have a calmer and clearer understanding both of who I am and of the people I work with. I can see more quickly their defense structure and what urges them to act as they do, which leaves me to concentrate on interpreting, which is, of course, a technique of psychoanalysis. I certainly would just say that has also been my own personal experience. For time's sake, I'm going to be assuming some working knowledge by the audience of the Passions of the Fathers. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Interestingly, the list of passions vary widely with the particular father, and I think this is really a good thing. Again, we don't have a really something that is just verbatim, quote unquote, passed down from one father to the next. I think this is a tremendous advantage. The list of the passions, the kind of passions, their hierarchy is very, very different from one father to the next. The passions are those energies within the soul that are mostly, but it depends on the particular father, not entirely viewed as dominating entities deep within us that control us in a negative way and establish overwhelming barriers to our path to theosis, that is, becoming Christ-like. The fathers definitively link these passions to spiritual warfare. The above-mentioned books by Metropolitan Hierotheos and Archbishop Chrysostomus will provide a nice comprehensive summary about this. In addition, I really like this. Passions and Virtues, according to St. Gregory Palamas, by Anastas Kassilopoulos. This is a really, really wonderful volume on the passions. Should also be stated at the beginning here that there are a number of different kinds of Enneagrams, and it gets really, really confusing, and I just really don't want to get into that. There's just all kinds of different applications and theories as to how they would apply to our lives. We are only concerned at this point, which is what is commonly referred to as the Enneagram of personality. As such, mention must be made of the influence of the analytically trained Gestalt practicing psychiatrist Claudio Naranjo. It was Naranjo who brought the insight tool of the Enneagram from Chile to the U.S. in the early 1970s, and the Enneagram that was strongly influenced by Freud. I can refer back to what I had just stated by the Archbishop above. Interestingly, it was the several Roman Catholic friars with direct connections to Naranjo who clearly saw the relationship of Christian spiritual practice with the Enneagram. And I know this is very, very common in Catholic retreat centers like this one. Oftentimes they will have an individual that will do Enneagram seminars or do personal private Enneagram counseling. I'm not sure if anybody here if they have somebody like that here, but did get spread through certain kind of narrow seeking populations within the Roman Catholic Church. And then there were a number of other students of Naranjo who passed the Enneagram to other kinds of seeking populations around the country. Ever since the reception of the Enneagram and the personality in the U.S., there has been this interesting ongoing debate regarding where the Enneagram originated from. Where did it come from? A great deal of mystery shrouded this topic until last summer in Chicago here, when original Naranjo student Helen Palmer, as I alluded to earlier, and Catholic educator Virginia Wiltsey proposed an incredible theory concerning this, which has since been published in the Enneagram Journal. I don't think that too many of you are going to want to subscribe to the Enneagram Journal. I wrote a kind of a blog about my experience. My wife accompanied me, and it was kind of really a riot. That kind of blog account is one of the things I've got back on the table back there, and that would provide somewhat of a summary, although, again, it would be much, much better to read the actual paper by Palmer and Wiltsey if you're interested in this. I would say just simply, I'm going to take this up toward the end again, that based upon listening to and actively engaging with these researchers, if it turns out that the theory is correct, it would appear then that God is the creator of the Enneagram, and I'll explain that at the end. It's really kind of quite fascinating. I'm not so sure that it's true. It's a big if. I will attempt to briefly summarize their findings at the end of the presentation. Please refer to the 3 sheets that I have. There's 1, 2, 3 of them. I've got 3 pictures of the Enneagram here. This is what the Enneagram looks like. There's a 9-pointed figure around a circle with a bunch of strange-looking lines running through it. you'll notice at the bottom of this first page, is figure 2 and figure 3. You'll notice that 9 kind of a spiritual holy number. There are 3 segments of 3. There are 3 points that belong to what's called a gut center, 3 points that are aligned with a head or mind center, and 3 that are aligned with a feeling or heart center. It's interesting. There is some overlap with Orthodoxy here with regard to the 3 powers stated by the Fathers with regard to the intellect, the nous, the appetitive, which would align to the kind of roughly the heart, and the insensitive, which would be a little bit more kind of the gut. Clearly, they are not identical. These 3 terms, I think, only have some overlap. They clearly are not exactly alike, but I do find kind of this overlap a little bit interesting. And speaking of authority, I was reading in the Philokalia, Volume 1 the other day, and I was looking at the glossary about the appetitive function, and the author there describes that the Fathers had borrowed this idea from Plato. So apparently the Fathers saw fit that Plato had 1 or 2 things that were authoritative they could borrow from. So it's not as though, of course, that the Fathers invented everything or received everything by direct revelation from God. I thought that was very, very interesting. Naturally, we're not going to go out and become Platonists, but in terms of authority, apparently they felt free to borrow from Plato, at least with regard to this aspect of the interior life. Page 2, the second one, is from Margaret Frankie's The Enneagram Relationship Workbook. Please don't spend much time on this. I only gave this to give you some sense of how different the points are. They are very, very different. There's very, very different energies associated. There's different character traits. There's an entirely different look of how the individual pays attention to the world and to themselves. There's a tremendous amount of information here, but kind of don't go crazy with this. And I especially, at the very bottom of the descriptions, you see DSM titles listed in parentheses. I just would really encourage you, just forget about all of that. This is really not very good. I really don't like that at all. But don't spend a lot of time. This is just a way of helping you to identify the differences among the styles. The third one, let's see. This one is taken from Helen Palmer's book, The Enneagram, from page 24. You'll notice then that the actual listings of the points by the passions best conform to Orthodox language at this point. A number of the Enneagram authors who write books, that sort of thing, again, being good Protestants, they're very free to substitute their own terms with regard to how they describe the passions. This is the closest that I've ever found that would overlap with Orthodox language. At point 9 at the top there, you'll notice Enneagram Palmer calls that the point of sloth, which we would refer to as acedia, or for you Greek purists, akidia. And then at 3, the passion is listed as deceit, and of course this would be vainglory. The reason that it's called deceit is because the idea at this point of the energies is that the individual is self-deceived with regard to who they are. The mix-up is that the individual identifies their performance out in the world as who they are. So this is why it's called deceit. The individual deceives themselves as to the exact interior nature of who they are. The identity is out there in terms of performance. Alrighty, the Enneagram community has historically linked the Enneagram passions to Orthodoxy via the Desert Father Evagrius. This is a very, very interesting. The Enneagram community has attempted for a long, long time to drag Orthodoxy into its midst. I bet a lot of you Orthodox didn't know that, did you? In the Philokalia, St. John Cassian is a disciple of Evagrius, writes succinctly in his On the 8 Vices. However, you will notice immediately that 8 does not equal 9. And so this has been some source of hand-wringing among the Enneagram community because, oh, gee, here we go. We know where the Enneagram comes from. It comes from Evagrius. And too bad there's only 8. Where's the other one? So what's missing from the list of the Evagrian passions is fear. And I don't want to pretend to stand up here and be an expert on the Fathers. I am not. I'm just really a lay enthusiast of the Fathers. I just really love reading them. Fear clearly is not mentioned nearly as much among the Fathers where these lists of passions are compared to the other ones. But fear is there. It definitely is there. I think the best example, I quote this from Hauscher's Spiritual Direction, the Christian East, is from going way back to Origen's. From his commentary in the Song of Songs, he says, anger, for example, does one suppress it with some and give vent to it with others? Or sadness, does one overcome it for certain things but not for others, or in everything? It is the same for fear and the other vices that are opposed to the virtues. And then I also have, I wrote a paper to the researcher Wiltsey, that's also located in the back, giving several other just crystal clear references in the Father to the fear as a passion, and you can see that. My own personal bias is to refer to one of Jesus' more favorite commandments, fear not. To me, I think that's the best source. Of more importance for all of you as practicing therapists is that the majority of your clients will be dominated by the passion of fear in the character structure. And I really want to take off with this in just a few minutes. A little bit of a bold statement, but I believe, really believe that it's true. In addition, Palmer and Wiltsey refer to the work of Evagrius in the Philokalia regarding the triangle and hexagonal figure, which is exactly what the Enneagram is, and we've discussed a little bit this aspect of numbers. Believe me, I'm not into all the number stuff. I think it's a little bit quirky. Wiltsey and Palmer do a little bit with regard to this, but again, I'm not quite so certain about that. But the point that Wiltsey and Palmer would make is that where did Evagrius get this whole idea of a figure of a triangle and a hexagonal figure, which is exactly what the Enneagram is. And so they suggest that, again, please don't misunderstand this. This is not a theory suggesting secret Gnostic sorts of teachings. It's not affiliated with Gnosticism as we know it. However, it is affiliated with, what shall we call it, secular knowledge that was perhaps burned up in the great library of Alexandria way back when. The idea is supposedly that there was some kind of information that was passed down in ancient times with regard to this. And that supposedly Orthodox in the Alexandrian community there had some sort of privy knowledge with regard to some of this, but again, it cannot be proved. Certainly, those of us in Orthodoxy know that we've never heard of anything like the Enneagram passed down in Orthodoxy, and I've written to the Enneagram Monthly on a number of occasions of trying to dispel this sort of idea. I do have copies of an article, some of you have picked it up already, by Lynn Carollo, entitled Pythagoras, Gurdjieff, and the Enneagram Part 2 in the Enneagram Monthly, where she correctly cautions us not to misinterpret origins of the Enneagram with ancient Christian bodies of teachings, especially the Desert Fathers. It just can't be proven that the Enneagram originated from the Desert Fathers. It just can't be. And Wiltsey and Palmer also come to this conclusion with regard to the Enneagram. It is a little bit funny because as much as some Enneagram authors will try to bring in Orthodoxy, generally their knowledge of Orthodoxy is very, very limited, such as when Lynn Carollo in the article refers to Mount Athos as a Russian Orthodox monastery in Greece. So you know there that it's not quite entirely filled in with regard to orthodoxy. Alrighty. Okay, the passions and character structure. Character structure was popularized by Freud and was the primary lens of looking at personality for several decades, maybe more than that. In more modern times, as Freud rapidly waned in influence and popularity, so did character structure, in my opinion, much to our disadvantage as psychotherapists. With Noranyo's superimposing of character structure onto the Enneagram, this powerful method and tool of insight is attempting to make a modest comeback. And I guess I would refer you, again, if you really want to get into this, Naranjo's Character and Neurosis is really the text for this. Character and Neurosis by Claudio Naranjo. And I think I've got this in the back of your sheets in a bibliography. And then Better is Naranjo's Transformation Through Insight, in which he goes through every single one of the 9 character structures and provides actual clinical examples detailing the how it fits with these particular patients, and that is really, really wonderful. And thanks to Dr. Muse for starting this within our Orthodoxy tradition. This is wonderful. I really love the book, Raising Lazarus. I just strongly recommend it. But this is the idea. We need more of this. We need actual clinical presentations to be able to do this. And Transformation Through Insight is a wonderful way of looking at actual clinical examples and how they conform to the particular passions in character structure. So then, what is character structure? I am not a expert on Freud. Far from it. I'm not. I don't pretend to be. Neither, by the way, am I a father. I was listed as a priest. I'm not that. So I wanted to know that I'm not pretending to be somebody that I'm not. But on the sheet, with these 3 concentric circles, I suggest a triadic model of a personality. That's good orthodoxy, right? And at the bottom, I have a very, very simple definition of a character structure. The specific conglomeration of certain personality traits or dynamics that are relatively consistent over a long period of time, that is a lifetime, and are fueled by a specific core passion. I'm not sure if I would use spiritual energy there. Maybe not a good term. But I think if I had to do this over again, these 3 concentric circles, I think in the 2 inner ones I would put dotted lines, because there's movement, there's dynamic movement of energy among the 3 concentric circles. On the outside is to convey more superficial, observable personality traits. He's really extroverted. He's really introverted. He's really talkative. He's really shy. He's easy to get along with. He's super perfectionistic. This is superficial personality traits. And then beneath the surface, kind of at a little bit more unconscious level, we have the character structure, and then way deep down underneath that, the core energy or the passion. It's very interesting because the core passion then has a way of influencing, coagulating, and bringing together certain of these personality traits and dynamics that form a whole or a unit. And this is very, very fascinating. Again, we're going to look at a unit. And this is very, very fascinating. Again, we're going to look at some of the differences between some of the orthodox understandings of the passions and how the Enneagram takes a look at that. Many of the Orthodox fathers describe the interior life by associating a kind of an interior body. So they mention the heart, and they mention the inner eyes or the mind, and they mention other sorts of things like that suggest an interior body that would be not literally associated with the outside body. With regard to character structure, and sometimes I'll explain it like this with interested clients that I have, is that it's a little bit like the organs of the body. We have a number of different organs of the body. They're very different, but they all work together to form a whole and a unit. And that's how I kind of see character structure is like. Now, again, I might say here that it's really, really important to understand that when you talk about character structure, that is just one part. It's just one part of the overall interior life of the individual. As far as I can see, when I read the Fathers, there's very, very little specific addressing of what we would refer to today as character structure. I think they just weren't really necessarily all that interested in that. But as we make psychological insights in modern day, this aspect of character structure has arisen and really can contribute to some significant insight into what exactly is going on with a particular client or patient that you're working with. Alrighty, where am I going here now? The working hypothesis of the Enneagram is that there is one dominant passion in each individual. Thus, a defining character structure for the most part. Interestingly, the same Father John the Starets advised his correspondent in letter 29 to pay attention to the chief passion, the one that is troubling you the most, although again, I strongly doubt that Father John was referring exactly to the Enneagram passion. The majority of teachers of the Enneagram believe that all 9 passions are present within us, but one is dominant and characteristically defining. And this would overlap with an Orthodox understanding. It's certainly true that I think the Fathers definitely believed that there was more than one passion operating within us, many of them, in fact. But when it comes to character structure, there is a defining energy that coalesces and puts these character traits together. I'm going to illustrate this using 2 of them. We just are not going to have enough time, I think, to do all 9. That would be, we'd have to have a couple of weekends to be able to do that. So we're going to look at pride and at fear. Pride, I think, because pride is really strongly emphasized, I think, by the Fathers. Many of them would say this is kind of the core difficulty with regard to our fall. There is some variety, I think, among the Fathers as to how they express this. Again, it's not uniform, and I think that's really a good thing. At a deeper level of pride, there is certainly a unanimity among the Fathers that pride represents that energy which acts or thinks in such a way as to separate us as alienation. We heard just so eloquently discussed this morning. That separate us from God by going our own way apart from God. This is, I don't think there's any controversy with regard to that. I think on more than a rare occasion, some of the Fathers, as I read them, they do describe pride at a more superficial level of the personality that I think at times would reflect more of an outward observable arrogance or conceit. I think sometimes it can be observed, and in many occasions it's going to be kind of silent deep within. With the Enneagram, this is going to be a big difference. Pride is always deep within. It's never, ever obvious or observable in the individual. So I'd like to illustrate kind of the difference between the two here and do a little bit of some of Palmer's technique here. I'm going to show you just a very, very brief scene from the Hallmark Hall of Fame movie, My Name is Bill W. Bill W., the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to be referring to him a little bit later. But I wish I could remember all the things we talked about this morning. I'm just chomping at the bit to talk about all these things. Now I'm going to forget about them all. So one of my favorite actors, James Woods, plays the lead role of the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. The background of the scene is that this is about 1/4 of the way into the movie. Bill has made a significant amount of money in the stock market as his own independent investor, and he's invited family, friends, and associates to celebrate. He takes every opportunity to sell, in this case, his brother-in-law, showcasing his talent and record, and unfortunately, it's 1929. Let me know about the volume of this.
Hello, there's another doctor in the house. It's like a convention in here. There we go. Oh, thank you.
Oh, my, what a beautiful place. I had no idea.
I told you the man is a Wall Street whiz kid. Did the butler come with these days?
Give him the night off. Come on in. Hello? Trust me on this, Leonard. Get your money out of those bonds. Okay, they're going nowhere. They put you into some good stocks. This is 1929. Stocks is where everyone should be.
Bill, I get nervous.
Have I been wrong yet? Have I? Huh? Okay, give me $20,000 and I'll put it into $200,000 at Pennington Ford on margin. You'll be a millionaire before Dr. Burnham can yank out another appendix.
Bill, if he feels better keeping it diversified, let him have his peace of mind.
There's no speculation here, Frank. I just don't want my brother-in-law to be a bum. I'd have to support him. Or one anyone can't let a 1912 Richelieu spoil now, can we?
No, we certainly cannot. Absolutely not. We're not going to let a 1912 Richelieu spoil. Okay, there you have what would be, of course, a more obvious, more superficial level of the personality's display of pride, of arrogance, conceit, and this is not uncommon with regard to the fathers mentioning something like that. But for the most part, of course, pride affects all of us pretty equally. Now I want you to notice, this is from one of Palmer's films, what pride looks like from the perspective of character structure. It's kind of interesting. How it happens is that when the passion of pride comes through the character structure, it looks a lot different. And it's very, very different. And so I'm just going to play a few minutes of this. They call them exemplars in the Enneagram community. A gal who identifies and does a very, very good job describing her experience within this particular character structure.
Emotional connection. We move to two who adapt to other people's needs.
In a relationship, I look for someone who inspires me. When it happens, I tend to wrap my whole life around them. Everything that I do has some kind of reflection on them. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a relationship with a lover, per se. It can be someone in business, it can be a friendship, it can be a neighbor. But this person takes on a real central place in my life. I feel alive and almost like I'm falling in love. A few years ago, I was an organizer for a woman who was a performer. And when I met her, I knew that I wanted in some way to be affiliated with her because, again, she had that quality that seemed to inspire me. So I organized her workshops, I organized her sessions. My apartment became her studio and her workshop space. All of my friends all of a sudden were enrolled into doing her workshops and her trainings. And everything in my life, its purpose was to help to bring her work out in some way. When I find someone to focus my life on and I take on their agenda, it feels like inside that I have found it, that I have been searching and searching for what's going to make my life work, and all of a sudden, here it is. How could I have not known? I've spent my entire life doing something that didn't make any sense to me, and all of a sudden I have found the one thing that I am supposed to be doing here. To me, it makes me feel great. It makes me feel alive. But to other people that are looking at me that have known me before this, it looks like I've made a 180 turn. When I was getting my MBA, I fell in love with a statistics professor. I saw him and I felt like someone hit me in the stomach, and I knew that I had to have him. And I became very single-minded about this. I made a study of him. I studied everything I could about him so that I would have things to talk to him about, figure out what he was interested in. I would study my notes that I was taking in marketing and in statistics, for things that I could ask him. Even if I understood it, I would pretend that I didn't understand it. So I would go to his office after hours and ask him questions about it so I could develop this rapport with him. So I found this way of kind of manipulating myself in to have a relationship with him. I ended up in my MBA becoming a statistician and majoring in market research. And After I graduated, I took a job in market research, sitting in a back office, not talking to anyone, just punching numbers. And it was only then that I realized that that was absolutely not where I wanted to be, but that I had taken on his entire agenda, become a statistician, and completely lost myself.
Alrighty. This is a very, very different individual from Bill W. If there is a lot of narcissism with Bill W., and I think that we could say that I don't particularly like to use that term. One of the words I think I wish would go out of vogue. This individual appears to be exactly the opposite. Far from being narcissistic, this is a wonderful, wonderful giver, a supporter of other individuals. These are truly, truly wonderful qualities. But what lies at the heart of the passion is pride. I'll be so indispensable to this individual that they won't be able to live without me. Just the magnanimity of my love, my warmth, my thoughtfulness will magically change and transform my lover into what he ought to be. Well, there's a little bit of pride there, isn't there? As an individual, see that pride takes a certain kind of flavor when it goes through the character structure this way. All right? I'd like to, I think we might have time. I want to give you a couple of client examples that I've seen with regard to two. But full disclosure here. My mother, one of my sisters, my godmother, my wife have this character style. Believe me, it is wonderful being the object of all this love and attention, I can tell you that. Alrighty. At the superficial level, personality Bill W. and our point to exemplar couldn't be more different. Bill is conceited, egotistical, loud, opinionated, controlling, a know-it-all, and on and on. And it certainly didn't hurt to be loaded. Our type 2 exemplar, a real individual, by the way. This is not an actor, actress. Warm, loving, emotionally sensitive, selfless, caring, and so forth. The pride is buried deeply within the character structure, but does in fact provide the energetic motivation of this style. Pride is reflected in the structure taking the high position with regard to others' needs. Value is determined by the individual's indispensable position to a significant other, even though it is reflected in a more positive, kind, and thoughtful ways. This is a character structure that excels in relationship, but ironically finds itself in difficulty in relationship because it's excessively other-oriented. They have difficulty identifying their own emotional needs and are subject to a slow but sure deterioration in felt emotional satisfaction in a relationship because of this. All right? Fear. It is the passion of fear that undergirds and energizes the character structure located at point 6 on the Enneagram. In contrast to the fathers who tend to mention fear rarely compared to the other passions, fear is at the heart of the difficulties of the majority of individuals you will see in a psychotherapeutic practice. And every mention of a client example today, I think, has reflected this so far. In the only survey conducted nationwide, and I would not, please don't misunderstand, I would not consider this to be scientific. It's only a survey. Only a survey conducted nationwide of therapists who actively use the Enneagram as an assessment and treatment planning tool. Individuals with 0.6 character structure were significantly overrepresented in client populations. In alcohol and drug treatment populations, 0.6 character structure is not just overrepresented, it's dominant. Bill W., the founder of AA, had this character structure. I've got several copies of an article that I wrote detailing this. Those of you who are interested in alcohol and drug work, please pick one of those up. There's a lot of detail about that back there. All of you as professionals will easily recognize aspects of this character structure. There's really no doubt about that. You've run into this. You're a professional. You've dealt very, very well. It's very, very clear. I think Ted and Dr. Muse's example certainly, most certainly 98% reflects this particular character structure. And it's not that you can't do without the Enneagram. You've done very, very well. But this will add an additional layer of deeper insight in terms of what's actually going on with the client. These traits and dynamics will not be new to you, but the Enneagram puts a whole new package together in a unified whole character structure that likely probably will be new to you. In the professional world, this is most frequently referred to as the paranoid personality, another term that I really don't like to use. However, I caution you at this point, for me, character structure does not represent pathology. This is really, really important. Every single person, no matter how healthy or unhealthy, is a character structure. And when we look at character structure theologically, really character structure does reflect the divine qualities that each one of us has. So there's a very, very positive side to the Enneagram and character structure when we look at it through the lens of orthodoxy. So it's important not to equate character dynamics with pathology. Notice in your handout, I think it's the next page, this page right here. This is from Rizzo and Hudson. And again, I would encourage you, don't take this too literally, but this is a nice example of the variation of character structure and how it looks based upon pathology or health. The individual that's very healthy with his character structure is going to look very, very differently than individual at a pathological level. All right. This is very, very helpful in terms of looking at. So character structure, not an indicator strictly of pathology. Okay, I'm going to show you a couple of examples coming up in a minute here, but the major organs on your handout here, page 2. The major organs of a character structure at point 6 are, number 1 or A, hypervigilant attention to the environment with regard to danger or what could go wrong. It's one organ. 2 or B on your handout, an elevated felt need for certainty and predictability in the environment. 3, projection in the classic application of that word. The picture.
Show us what you're looking at.
Here. Sorry, I don't have them written down.
Are you looking ABC? Or?
Yes, ABC, yes. I'm sorry.
Can you say those again?
Yes, I will. Yes, the second page here, the organs of fear character structure. Sorry, I'm going to make you do a little bit of work so that you won't fall asleep.
What does it start with?
A, hypervigilant attention to the environment with regard to danger or what could go wrong. B, an elevated felt need for certainty and predictability in the environment. C, projection. Projection in the classic application of that word. The picture, image, feeling, thought, character quality, including and especially will, inside the individual is projected onto another individual, group, object, or external idea and seen on or in that external object. I'm going to give some examples of this. And Ted is a good example of this from Stephen's book. Ted sees and hears his coffee cup talking to him. And we appropriately, of course, see this as a psychotic experience, and all of that appears to be dealt with very, very well. Again, when I make a comment on Ted, I don't want you to get the wrong conclusion that I'm criticizing this. I think the therapist involved really did a very good job in this situation. So I'm going to add a little bit of more insight with regard to Ted, hopefully. What's going on with Ted is that the words that he hears coming from the coffee cup are words that he says to himself. So he takes those words that are said to himself and projects them onto the coffee cup and hears them from there. So here's an example. I think this individual thinks that this is all a bunch of crazy stuff. See right there? He lifted his eyebrow. I know it. He's thinking that about me. See? It's true. I know it's true. See, what I did is I just projected onto that individual. I think I'm crazy. I don't really want to own that, take responsibility for it. So I'll have it coming from him. And I'll look for evidence up there. He raised his eyebrow. See, he's nodding there. And that means that he thinks I'm crazy. Yes, that's an example of projection, but I'm going to give you a couple of other aspects of projection that are really significant and inclined examples. All right. Group identity. Oh, this is all coming back to me now. This, what we talked about this morning, individual versus group. No individuality here, I'll tell you that. We are far, far, far extreme group identity. All right? Worst case imagination. I hesitate to write these. I'm sure you can't even read those. My handwriting is so bad. Worst case imagine works very closely with a projection. Like a projector in a movie theater, the image is magnified and the environment disproportionately. So here's and I'll do this with a client. Everybody knows what a projector is. Movie theater. You sit in the movie theater and you're engrossed in the picture out there, and all of a sudden, maybe if you're sitting up toward the back, there's light and you see the dust flying. Well, where's that coming from? The picture is back there. But we're all engrossed with a picture on the big screen out there. Okay? So the movie camera is a wonderful illustration of projection. We've got our film here. We've got a light source here. The light shines through. And the real true film is actually here, but it gets projected out onto a wall out here and magnified. You see it out there. Okay. Whoops. Okay. Worst case imagination works with projection. Questioning and doubting. What is this? A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay? Big one. Bipolar dynamic. This is not DSM, bipolar disorder. Please, 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 please don't go away from here thinking bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder is a psychiatric condition. We're not talking about a psychiatric condition. We're talking about a trait of the character structure. Bipolar dynamic. This is the operating of opposite extremes, most often referred to as all or nothing thinking. All of you are familiar with this. It's not just all or nothing thinking, and it's all or nothing everything. Feeling, doing, the whole kit and caboodle. Varies a great deal with regard to its application, frequency, and intensity from one person to another. And the other thing you're going to recognize immediately, this is the fight or flight phenomenon. All of you know this. This is nothing new. It reflects the opposite sides of a strategy dealing with fear and authority. Let's see. Last one, authority dynamic. An excessive hypervigilance to power sources in the environment that are magnified and either vilified or mythologized via projection and imagination. Thus, there is an over-attachment to the environmental figure. This came out many, many times this morning. Okay? So this is how it looks. There's this projector here. With projection, the individual takes something, projects it out onto the environment, and appears magnified out in the environment. So the individual starts out deep, deep down inside, and sometimes this is obvious and sometimes it's not obvious at all. It varies a lot from one person to the next. This feeling less than. Now, with a bipolar dynamic, you've got two opposite expressions of this. They're referred to as the phobic side with regard to fear and authority. And you have a counterphobic side. Both sides start off in this position. This side is more obvious with regard to seeing this take place. And I'll show you an exemplar in just a minute. It is much, much harder seeing this on this side. Much harder, because the individual comes off just exactly like Bill W. This is not an individual with low self-esteem. Right. So the individual sees this down there, and there is an opposite reaction to that goes to the opposite extreme. Okay? Now, this can happen, this flipping back and forth from one side to the other, can happen within the same individual, and I would hasten to add that this is not a split personality. No. Not a split personality. Okay? This is not multiple personality disorder. This is a unified whole character structure. This is not split. Okay? All right. Okay. Here is an example of an individual that would tend, for the most part, to identify more what we call the phobic side, kind of the low self-esteem side, the flight side.
Visibility kind of makes me freeze. And there's a visibility that goes with success that's very frightening. The feeling is like being somewhat like a rabbit, frightened by being spotlighted in the headlights. They freeze until the authorities' attention moves elsewhere. An example of this would be at my job, where in a recent reorganization I had the opportunity to move ahead to take more additional responsibility in another area. But what I really did was freeze until they weren't paying attention to me anymore, and then it was safe to move ahead. The concern in situations like this is that I'll be challenged in some way, that my intellectual capability will be looked at, found inferior, that I won't be able to deliver under pressure. The fact is that when it actually happens, I do fine. So what's really going on is all imagination. This imagination, it's in my mind, but it's very real to me. It's focused almost entirely on worst-case scenarios. So, for example, if my intellectual ability is challenged, then my job is challenged, then it goes very quickly to losing my job, to no paycheck, to not being able to feed my family, and homelessness, the whole bit. It's very helpful for me to get down into my body and out of my imagination. For example, I was loaned out on a very important project for the company I worked for, where I needed to make a number of cold calls without introduction to people that I don't know. My imagination was that these people were going to dump on me, that they would be angry, they would tell me all of their complaints they had with the company I worked for. I was only able to make the call when I got myself out of my head, and out of thinking, and just into my body and made the call. As it turned out, the calls were very successful. For the most part, all the people I called were quite open to doing what I wanted to do. I faced the same thing as a manager. I've been a manager for years, and I really enjoy doing it. Manage up to 40 people. I find that incredible that when I move from one part of the company to another, that people who work for me in the first part want to come along and work for me in the second part. I find this incredible because of the doubt. Why would anyone, to me, my doubt is, why would anyone want to work for me? I imagine myself knowing all my liabilities as being an awful manager. The truth is that people around me don't see it that way at all. The way that I manage is to balance between business needs and people needs. I see myself in a lot of ways as kind of a protector of my people, sheltering them from the political activity going on in the hierarchy. For example, we instituted a project where the people in my group worked at home 2 days a week. And of course we measured the productivity and found that actually they were more productive at home than they were in the office. And I was able to present this to upper management and get it approved, and it became actually more widespread. This kind of success is okay. It feels safe because it's for someone else other than for myself. In fact, I find it difficult to take credit for it. I find my doubting mind very useful in a business situation where questioning can be very helpful in troubleshooting, for example, where having a discerning mind is useful in avoiding sort of woolly thinking. It really gets in the way, though, in an intimate relationship where doubting and questioning can get in the way of my own feelings and can offend the person I want to be close to. So I guess the thing I would say is, don't be insulted when I question you, when I seem doubting. I'm just trying to reassure myself. So in a relationship, I feel a dependency to have someone reassure me, to tell me that I'm okay, to tell me even that my clothes I'm going to wear look okay. It's very helpful for me when my wife expresses her confidence in me and reminds me that I've been successful in the past, that I can take action safely. Even though we've been married for over 18 years and have 4 children and been through a lot together, I still doubt her intent. I doubt her when she tells me that she's confident in me, or even when she says that she loves me. Once in a while, it gets through, and I realize that she really does love me. It's a shock. It's like, oh my God, someone loves me. Someone really cares about me. So because I walk around with all these dark, brooding, doubtful thoughts, I assume everyone else is doing the same thing. I assume, for example, my wife is doubting me or questioning about my intentions the same way I am with her. I project the doubts that are going on inside me onto her and question her loyalty and feelings for me. Let me give you an example of this. My wife is into schedules. She likes to plan things out so it's all neat and boxed up and listed on a list, and we know exactly what we're supposed to be doing. Sometimes she'll schedule an entire weekend that way, with no free time, everything arranged, and know exactly how to get it done, without consulting me at all. I feel completely left out. This fairly quickly degenerates into a scenario, an imagination of my own, that she's doing this on purpose, that she's doing it deliberately to hurt me.
When the truth of the matter is that that's just the way she is. But she's doing that. See, because implicit in this large figure projection, this individual, there's a little space down here that's just prepared to be the victim. Because we're in this low position. Things out there are larger, stronger than I am. So there's a sensitivity to being on the victim end of things. See. And a great example of the worst case scenario is lent out on a job. There's meanies out there, those new guys in the new company. They're just going to ream me up and down. And my gosh, if that were true, who would want to make a call like that? I sure wouldn't. Problem is, it's not true, or at least we don't know that it's true. So this is a projection. See that he's got to have certainty. We don't know what they think out there, those guys in the other company. We don't know, but this is a style that's got to have certainty. We've got to have certainty. We've got to have predictability. So we'll just put stuff in their heads. We've got certainty. Bing. I know what I'm up against. Too bad it's not true. So, fortunately, this is a healthy enough guy. He doesn't sabotage his success by, I can't make that call. He makes the call. Lo and behold, it goes fine. And this is very, very common with this style, okay? Alrighty. Okay, counterphobic. Counterphobic. Every now and then there's really, really a great movie that comes along. My Name is Bill W. is one of them, where Hollywood gets it right. Just really terrific, great characterological accuracy, a little bit over the top, but some really great, perfect descriptions of the character styles. I'm going to be playing a clip from the movie Good Will Hunting. And there is a lot of stuff that's over the top, but it's a wonderful, wonderful, characterologically accurate depiction of a very, very unhealthy counterphobic. I warn you in advance, the language is very strong. If it offends any of you, I really do apologize, but I trust your therapist. You can handle it right. I see this kind of client very frequently in my practice. All right? So the counterphobic side. This is a side that tries to hide fear, goes to the opposite aggressive fight side. But you can see, underneath all of that, there's a lot of fear going on. This might be a little loud. I might have to adjust this.
Indeed.
I should say, this is toward the end of the movie, and Will, played by Matt Damon, he's the greatest underachiever in the history of mankind. A super genius who swabs the deck out at MIT as a janitor. A dramatic, over-the-top, exaggerated how this style will tend to defeat itself and talk itself out of moving forward to success, even on the aggressive side of it. Well, lo and behold, kind of miraculously, really, he hooks up with a good gal that's graduating from Harvard. She's going to be moving off to go to med school in Stanford. They fall in love. She wants him to move out to California with him, and this is his response.
No.
Yes, you. We'll come to California with me.
What?
I want you to come to California with me.
You sure about that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but how do you know?
Certainty.
I don't know. I just know.
How do you know?
I know because I feel it.
Because that's a very serious thing to say.
I know.
You could be in California next week and you might find out something about me you don't like and maybe you wish you hadn't said that, but it's such a serious thing that you can't take it back, and now I'm stuck in California. Someone doesn't really want to be with me, just wish they had to take it
He's
back.
a victim.
What's the take back? I don't want to take back. I just want you to come to California with me.
I can't go to California.
Why not?
One, because I got a job here, and two, because I live here.
Look, if you don't love me, you should just tell me because it's such a bummer. Why? Why won't you come? What are you so scared of?
Uh-oh.
What am I so scared of?
Uh-oh.
Well, what aren't you scared of? You live in the safe little world where no one challenges you and you're scared shitless to do anything else.
Don't tell me about my world. Don't tell me about my world. I mean, you just want to have your little fling with, like, the guy from the other side of town. Then you're going to go off to Stanford. You're going to marry some rich who your parents will approve of. And just sit around with the other trust fund babies and talk about how you went slumming too once.
Why are you saying this? What is your obsession with this money? My father died when I was 13 and I inherited this money. Feeling every day I wake up. And I wish that I could give it back. I would give it back in a second. If it meant I could have one more day with him. But I can't. And that's my life and I deal with it. So don't put your shit on me when you're the one that's afraid.
What am I afraid of? What the fuck am I afraid of?
You're afraid of me, you're afraid that I won't love you back. You know what? I'm afraid too. I want to give it a shot and at least I'm honest with you.
I'm not honest with you?
No, what about your 12 brothers? No, you're not going. You're not leaving.
What do you want to know? What? That I don't have 12 brothers?
You
That I'm an orphan? No, you don't want to hear
I
that.
didn't know
No,
that.
you don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear that I got
Right.
cigarettes put out of me when I was a little kid.
know
That this
that.
isn't surgery, that the mother stabbed me. You don't want to hear that, Skylar.
I
Don't
do want to
don't
hear
tell
it.
me you want to hear that.
I do it because I want to help you, because I
Help
want to
me?
be
What,
with
what do I got? A side act? It's to save me?
No.
Do I look like I need that?
No, God, I just want to be with you.
Don't,
I love you.
don't hit me. Don't you
I
me.
I love you. I want to hear you say that you don't love me. Because if you stay, and I'm not cool with you, I won't be in your life.
I don't love you.
Alrighty. Counterphobic. So what would we think in terms of passions? Anger, right? And we wouldn't be wrong. I wouldn't be wrong to say, well, fathers, this guy's got an anger problem. It's true. It's absolutely true. And pride, I don't need no help. I don't need any help. Pride. But characterologically, the character structure, this is all undergirded by fear. Fear is the dominant characterological passion. This all starts with fear. Now immediately, worst case scenario, imagine off into the future, and he's going to be a victim because we have to have certainty. We could never take a risk in a relationship, move out there because this is what's going to happen. We've got it all planned out. So this style that oftentimes has a hard time taking normal risks in life. But on the other hand, he'll take exaggerated risks that will defeat his life and get him into trouble. So we've got opposite sides of risk-taking with this style. And nice fear comes through really, really well. But he's not going to admit to it because tough guys will never, ever admit to fear. That's for sissies and weak guys. Okay, but fear dominates throughout the whole movie. So there's 12 brothers and sisters. Why? Well, this is Boston. This is Catholic country. We have to be Irish. We have to have a large family. What if I'm not like the typical group? What if I'm not like the typical group in Boston that's Catholic and has a large family? She will just dump me like a lead balloon. That's what's going to happen. There's a lot of evidence that she's willing to work with the guy. She wants to listen to him. Oh, you don't want to listen to me. He's already had it planned out. But the fact of the matter is that she's very, very willing to do that. He sabotages the relationship. All right? Okay.
There's another example of that in played by Russell Crowe when he plays Nash, the Nobel Prize
Yes.
mathematician.
Yes, absolutely.
That whole movie just drives me nuts.
There's a type 6 character structure at its extreme. So there are some good movie illustrations of this, but for the most part, Hollywood does a really, really poor job of this kind of character development. But there are some really, really good ones. And that is another really good one. Oh, what do I want to say here? We're running out of time. In spite of the tough guy image that he presents throughout the whole movie, Will makes these numerous little decisions based on fear. He lies all the time, but then he covers it over. Lies about his family, lies about why he lost his job, because he could never, ever tell the truth. That would make me look bad. He ran off in his job and tells his buddies that he got downsized. After they started dating, they're parked in a parked car and it's raining out, and he's going to go call her again. Oh, this is a good gal, let's go call her again. And on the phone, and he freezes. He can't talk to her. Comes back to the car. Oh, I forgot her number. It's photographic memory, 210 IQ. Oh, I forgot her number, right. Yeah, you forgot her number. And projection. Throughout the whole movie, of course, he does all this stuff, all this lying, all this BSing, and then he blames her for being the big BSer. This is projection. And when conflict arises in couples, there's 5, 6, 7, 8 things that could happen in conflict in couples, but this is at the top of the list when it comes to conflict in couples of this style. is at the top of the list. Alrighty, I already talked about Ted. I might go back to Ted in a minute here. In fact, fear, not anger, that dominates the perspective and decisions of Will. Fear comes up quickly in the scene, prompted by Skyla, played by Minnie Driver, who challenges Will's ability to be open and honest about his fears. Thus we see both sides of this character structure, the tough guy and the fearful individuals undergirded by fear. All right, a word about the origins of the Enneagram real quick. It's not a mystery that astronomy was the leading, if not the leading, scientific endeavor in the ancient world. Research of Palmer and Wiltsey concentrates heavily in the Persian and Far Eastern world dominance of this science. An extremely cut-down version, this is what Palmer and Wiltsey have proposed based upon textual evidence, and they're not arrogant about this, very, very humble about it. They don't propose this theory as though it were God's truth. They're very, very open to being wrong, and they could be. We refer to the article again, I talked about that. Over a period of decades, if not centuries, the ancients observed that the 5 major planets and the sun formed patterns in the sky against the backdrop of the universe that precisely conformed to the hexagonal figure of the Enneagram. Furthermore, the nature of the movements of these planets and the sun acted in such a way as to have personalities. These personalities were then ascribed to what we now know as the ancient and then Roman gods. Looking at the ancient descriptions of the personalities of these gods is amazingly similar to the current descriptions of the 6 personalities on the hexagon. The inner triangle of the Enneagram was observed in the 3 phases, 9 days each, of the moon. The full moon is at the apex of the Enneagram at point 9, with waning and waxing phases representing points 3 and 6. The new moon at the bottom of the Enneagram represents the open bottom of the Enneagram. Thus the conclusion, if they are correct, is a big if. Indeed, God then created the Enneagram. The only theological or biblical reference Wiltsey made in her presentation was at the very beginning when she displayed Psalm 19:1. The heavens declare the glory of God. Is it true? I don't know. It's a very fascinating theory.